7:41 p.m. The 8th of July, 1964. The marble lobby of the Dunbar Heights Hotel, Harlem's north edge, where the chandeliers tried to pretend the street didn't exist. A man in a cream fedora leaned in close, cheeks flushed with whiskey courage. Then he spat, right on the lapel of Bumpy Johnson's charcoal suit. The spit caught the chandelier light like a bead of glass, and for half a second, the whole lobby stopped. Bellhop doorman, the couple by the elevator, even the pianist whose fingers hovered over the keys like he forgot the next note. Freeze that, because this wasn't a bar scuffle. This was a public insult delivered in a room full of witnesses, designed to make one thing happen. Bumpy gets loud, Bumpy gets violent, Bumpy becomes the headline. But Bumpy didn't move. He looked down at the spit like it was dust. Then he smiled. Slow, polite, and lifted his eyes. "Can I get a napkin?" he asked. Not a threat, not an insult, just a question so calm it made the air feel wrong. And the question for you is simple. Why would anyone spit on a man like that? Unless they needed him to react. But that wasn't the end. Because minutes later, the man in the fedora would realize he'd stepped into a trap that didn't require a single raised hand. And the scariest part, the napkin wasn't for the suit. It was for wiping away someone's confidence. No, listen. This is a fictionalized, dramatized street, legend telling, not a sworn statement, not a claim of real history, just the kind of story a city tells itself when it's trying to explain how power really works. Bumpy's real power wasn't volume, it was access. To doors, to favors, to paperwork, to the little quiet systems that decide who gets protected and who gets processed. And this week, Harlem had been getting processed. The injustice started with redevelopment. That word that sounds like improvement when you say it slow. A new Harlem Renewal Authority had begun circling blocks with clipboards and smiles. Landlords got letters. Tenants got warnings. Businesses got inspection notices. Paper can kill you in this town. And Bumpy's people, store owners, numbers runners, church ladies, musicians, were getting squeezed by paper they didn't understand and couldn't fight. The villains behind that squeeze wore 3 different faces. The institutional face villain was Inspector Harold Mott, City Buildings and Safety. Neat hair, neat suit, neat cruelty. His tell was a small brass ruler. He tapped against his clipboard when he lied, and the phrase he used like a stamp. "By the book," Mott would say, eyes blank. The shadow villain was a political handler named Warren Klein. Harlem Renewal Authority counsel, the kind of man who never sweats. His tell was he adjusted his cufflinks before he spoke, and he always said the same line like he was offering mercy. "Let's be practical," Klein would purr. And the on-scene enforcer, the muscle with a smile, was a man called Dutch Ramirez. Heavy shoulders, soft shoes. His tell was a toothpick that never left the corner of his mouth, and the phrase he'd whisper when he wanted a room to obey. "You heard me." Those 3 weren't trying to beat Harlem with clubs. They were trying to evict Harlem with stamps, and they had a plan. They needed Bumpy Johnson to be the reason the plan looked necessary. So they built a moment with witnesses, a moment with cameras, a moment with a man in a fedora who thought courage came from liquor and friends. His name was Cal Mercer, small-time promoter, big-time ego. The kind of man who talked too loud when he wanted to feel tall. Cal's friends called him Calm Cal as a joke, because he never was. Tonight, Cal was a fuse. And Inspector Mott was the man holding the match. Bumpy's allies were there too, because Bumpy didn't walk alone when the city felt hungry. Little Leon Vega, his runner, quick feet, quicker mouth, Miss Odessa. The numbers queen, older broker, eyes sharp as needles, never blinking first, Ruthie Caldwell. Journalist, ink-stained finger, nose for hypocrisy. Fearless in rooms where fear paid rent, and Eddie Glass, former cop turned contact. Tired eyes, steady voice knew how institutions moved when they wanted to bury something. They were in the Dunbar Heights lobby because the hotel was hosting a renewal gala. A fundraiser with velvet ropes and champagne meant to show Harlem it was being helped. It was also where K-Line would be seen smiling next to landlords who'd suddenly discovered ambition. Bumpy walked and dressed. Clean, suit pressed, shoes polished, face calm, not to celebrate, to watch. Because the city doesn't run on rules, it runs on favors. And tonight, favors were being traded in plain sight. Bumpy nodded at the doorman. The doorman nodded back like relief. Miss Odessa murmured, "Baby, look at this. They selling Harlem like it's a raffle." Leon whispered, "Why we even here?" Bumpy's voice stayed low. "Because this is where their paper learns to talk." Ruthie's eyes tracked the room. "I see Klein." Eddie's gaze lifted. "And I see Dutch." Dutch Ramirez stood near the ballroom doors, toothpick angled, smiling like he'd already measured everyone's courage. "You heard me," Dutch murmured to a bellhop who moved too slow. And then Cal Mercer drifted in, cream fedora tilted. Grin loud, he spotted Bumpy and stiffened like he'd seen a challenge he could finally afford. They didn't realize one thing. Cal wasn't acting alone. Cal was being carried by ego, by liquor, and by somebody who promised him protection after the insult. Cal walked right up, close enough that the doorman tensed. "Bumpy Johnson," Cal said, voice bright. "You looking real corporate." Bumpy looked at him calm. "Good evening, Cal." Cal's grin widened. "You hear they renovating the neighborhood, finally." Miss Odessa's eyes narrowed. "Renovating ain't the word." Cal turned his head toward her like she was background noise. "I'm talking to him." Ruthie's pen hovered inside her coat pocket. Eddie's jaw tightened. Bumpy's face stayed calm. Cal leaned in, whispering loud enough to be heard. "You still think you own Harlem?" Inspector Mott stood near the check. In desk, clipboard tucked under his arm. Ruler tapping faintly. Tap, tap. "By the book," he murmured to nobody. Warren Klein was in the background, cufflinks adjusting, eyes watching. "Let's be practical," he whispered, smiling. This was the setup. Bumpy reacts. Dutch controls the response. Mott records it. Klein uses it. Harlem gets painted as dangerous. Renewal gets painted as necessary. Paperwork gets stamped faster. That was the mistake. Because Bumpy didn't give them the reaction. He gave them something worse. He gave them control. Bumpy looked down at the spit. Then he smiled, like he'd been offered a polite inconvenience. "Can I get a napkin?" Bumpy asked the bellhop. The bellhop blinked, confused. "A napkin, sir? Yes?" Bumpy said, voice easy. "Please?" Cal Mercer's grin twitched. He expected anger. He expected fear. He expected a fist. Instead, he got manners. Cal scoffed. "That's it. You just wiping it off?" Bumpy's eyes lifted to Cal's calm. "I didn't say it was for the suit," Bumpy replied. Silence snapped tighter. Ruthie's breath caught. Eddie looked at Bumpy like he saw the chessboard. Miss Odessa's lips pressed together, satisfied. Cal's smile faded a fraction, because Cal didn't know what that meant, and not knowing is how traps start. Minute 3. The bellhop hurried off, hands shaking. Dutch Ramirez shifted, toothpick rolling, watching Bumpy like he was watching a bomb that wouldn't tick. "You all right?" Dutch asked, soft. "You heard me," he added without meaning to, like a habit. Bumpy turned his head slightly, eyes settling on Dutch. "I'm fine," Bumpy said. Dutch smiled like he'd done something. He leaned in closer, voice low. "No need to make a thing." Bumpy nodded. "Agreed." Dutch's toothpick paused. He didn't like agreement. Agreement stole his job. Cal Mercer laughed too loud. "Look at that. Harlem royalty needs a napkin." Bumpy didn't look at Cal. He looked past him, toward Inspector Mott. Mott's ruler tapped twice against the clipboard. Tap, tap. By the book, Mott said, polite. Bumpy held his gaze a beat too long. Mott's smile faltered, because Bumpy's eyes weren't angry. They were recording. Minute 7. The bellhop returned with a folded white napkin, edges crisp, like it had never met reality. He held it out like an offering. Bumpy took it with 2 fingers. Cal leaned in, gloating. Go on. Bumpy didn't wipe the suit. He dabbed his own lapel once, light almost nothing. Then he folded the napkin carefully. He turned, and without raising his voice, he extended the napkin toward Cal. Hold this, Bumpy said. Cal blinked. What? Bumpy's smile stayed. Hold it for me. Cal laughed. Man, I'm not your. Bumpy's eyes tightened just a hair, not anger. A boundary. Cal's laugh died halfway. He reached out, without knowing why, and took the napkin. The moment it touched his fingers, Cal realized something. Everybody was looking at him now, not at Bumpy, at Cal. Bumpy's voice stayed soft. Now, Bumpy said, we're both holding something. Cal swallowed. What's that supposed to mean? Miss Odessa murmured, barely audible. Baby, he just turned you into evidence. Har 1, they moved into the ballroom like nothing happened. Music played. Champagne glasses clinked. Laughter floated. But the lobby insult had followed them in like a smell. Cal kept the napkin in his hand, confused and irritated, like he didn't know when to put it down. He approached Dutch near the wall. What the hell was that? Cal hissed. Dutch's toothpick shifted. Relax. Cal's eyes darted. You said I'd be protected. Dutch's voice stayed low. You are. Cal clenched the napkin. He made me look stupid. Dutch leaned in, whispering. You heard me. Relax. At the far end, Warren Kyline adjusted his cufflinks and smiled at Bumpy like this was just business. Mr. Johnson, Kyne said smoothly, enjoying the evening? Bumpy's tone was polite. I enjoy clarity. Kyne chuckled. Let's be practical. This neighborhood is changing. You can either benefit or get left behind. Bumpy sipped his drink. Slow. I'm not afraid of change, Bumpy said. I'm afraid of theft dressed as change. Kyne's smile tightened. Strong words. Bumpy nodded. Strong paper. Kyne glanced toward Inspector Mott, who was already drifting closer, with that clipboard like it was a weapon. Eddie Glass murmured to Bumpy, They gonna try to make this official. Bumpy replied, without looking at him. Let them. Ruthie watched the room, eyes narrowing. You got a plan? She whispered. Bumpy's voice was calm. 72 minutes. Ruthie blinked. 72 minutes for what? Bumpy's gaze stayed on Cal Mercer's hand, for the napkin to do its job. Bumpy said, Horror 2, the proof object wasn't a gun. It wasn't a bag of cash. It was a phone log. Exactly one, because in this town, you don't win by being tougher. You win by being provable. Bumpy's people had been trying to get a hold of a single switchboard printout from the Dunbar Heights internal calls made from the ballroom office, the kind used to coordinate security and incidents. Eddie had a contact in the hotel's back office, an older operator named Lila Red, who'd been answering phones since men wore hats indoors. Lila's tell was her humming, soft, constant like a lullaby to keep fear from talking. They needed one thing from her, the call log that would show who directed Dutch, who called Inspector Mott, and who set Cal Mercer up as bait, but obtaining it wouldn't be clean, because Kyne didn't leave loose ends. Eddie slipped out through a side door into a service hallway that smelled like boiled cabbage and bleach. Leon followed, jittery. I don't like back hallways, Leon whispered. Eddie didn't slow. Back hallways is where truth lives. They reached the operator's closet. A small room with a phone console and a coffee cup with lipstick marks. Lila looked up, humming stopping mid. Note, itty glass, she said, tired. You always show up when trouble is hungry. Itty's voice softened. Lila, I need the ballroom line log. Lila's eyes darted to the door. I can't. Leon leaned in. Please. Lila's jaw tightened. A man in cufflinks already told me not to. Complication. 1. Warren Klein's shadow had been here first. Eddie's voice stayed calm. Lila, if they told you not to, that means it matters. Lila swallowed. It matters enough to get me fired, Leon blurted. Bumpy can. Eddie shot him a look. Lila's eyes narrowed. Bumpy can. What? Save me. Eddie said quietly. Bumpy can make them regret touching you. Lila exhaled, humming starting again like she needed it. Then she opened a drawer and slid out a thin strip of paper. A phone log stamped in blue at the top, house eyes only, and right across the middle, someone had spilled ink. An accidental blot like a bruise. That was the memory hook, that stamp. That blot, you'd recognize it anywhere, Lila whispered. That's what you want. Itty nodded. That's what we need. Leon reached for it. And complication 2 arrived with footsteps. Dutch Ramirez in the doorway, toothpick in place, smile soft. You heard me, Dutch said gently, like he was talking to children. Hand it over. Leon's fingers froze. Eddie didn't move. Dutch's smile widened. No need to get dramatic. Eddie's eyes stayed flat. We're not dramatic. Dutch stepped closer, soft shoes silent. Then be smart. He extended his hand. Leon's breathing got quick. His eyes flicked to the paper, to Dutch, to the hallway behind. And there it was again. That fracture, that temptation to trade truth for safety. I can't go back in there, Leon whispered. I can't. Dutch leaned in, voice warm. You don't have to. Give me the paper, and you walk out clean. That's how the system recruits you? Not with threats, with exits. Leon's hand loosened. Eddie's voice cut through, low and hard. Leon, Eddie said, don't rent your name. Leon blinked, tears of panic. Hot. Miss Odessa's proverb landed in his head like a slap. Never trade your shield to the man swinging the stick. Leon clenched the log. No, Leon said, shaking. Number Dutch's smile died. He moved like he was going to take it. Eddie stepped forward. Not fast, not aggressive, just their control. Dutch, Eddie said, if you touch that, you're touching a stamped log, house eyes only. That's not street business, that's hotel business. Dutch's toothpick stopped. Lila spoke up, voice trembling but clear. And I'll scream. Dutch looked at her, surprised. Lila's eyes hardened. I've been quiet my whole life. I can be loud once. Dutch held the moment, weighing it. Then he smiled again, thin. You heard me, he whispered, but it sounded weaker now. He stepped back, letting them pass. And that's when you know a man's control isn't real. It's borrowed, Har 3. They returned to the ballroom with the phone log folded inside Eddie's coat, like a heartbeat. Bumpy stood near the bar, calm, watching Cal Mercer. Cal still held the napkin like he didn't know how to get rid of it. Ruthie slipped beside Bumpy. They've got something, she whispered. Bumpy didn't look away from Cal. Good. Eddie approached, eyes tired but steady. He slid the folded strip to Bumpy without anyone seeing. Bumpy opened it with care. House eyes only stamped at the top, ink blot in the center, and the calls. Ballroom office Fay Inspector Mott's line. Ballroom office Fay Warren Kine's private number. Ballroom office Fay Dutch Ramires's pager service. Time stamps stacked like dominoes. Right before Cal spat. Right after Cal arrived. They didn't realize one thing. The trap wasn't the spit. The trap was the coordination. And now, Bumpy had it in his hand. The centerpiece moment didn't happen in an alley. It didn't happen with fists. It happened in the brightest part of the ballroom, under chandeliers, in front of donors, with music still playing. Warren Klein stepped onto the small stage to toast. Renewal, like it was salvation. Inspector Mott stood beside him, clipboard in hand, ruler tapping once. Twice. "By the book," Mott murmured, smiling. Dutch leaned near the wall, toothpick working. Cal Mercer hovered near the front, napkin still in hand, sweat forming at his temples like his body knew something his mind didn't. Bumpy moved forward slowly, not rushed, not angry, just certain. Ruthie followed at a distance, eyes locked, ink stain like a badge. Eddie drifted to the side. "Ready?" Miss Odessa stayed seated, because queens don't stand to prove they're queens. Klein raised his glass. "Ladies and gentlemen," Klein began, voice smooth, "let's be practical." Bumpy's voice cut in. "Calm, Mr. Klein," Bumpy said. "Before you toast, can I borrow your eyes?" The room laughed politely. Unsure, Klein's smile widened. "Mr. Johnson, always a showman." Bumpy shook his head slightly. "No show." He held up the phone log. The blue stamp caught the chandelier light. "House eyes only, freeze that." Because the reaction was instant and visible. Klein's champagne glass tilted, spilling a thin stream down his fingers. Inspector Mott's ruler slipped from his hand and clacked against the stage wood. The pianist hit a wrong note and stopped. Dutch's toothpick fell from his mouth and bounced once on the floor. And Cal finally looked down at the napkin in his hand, like it was burning him. No big speech, just a few lines, mechanically undeniable. Bumpy's voice stayed soft. "These calls happened before I got spit on." Ruthie spoke from the side, sharp. "Ballroom office to Inspector Mott. Ballroom office to Warren Klein. Ballroom office to Dutch Ramirez." Klein's smile tightened. "That's..." Bumpy lifted a finger, gentle. "Don't." Inspector Mott tried to recover, tapping empty air by the book. Bumpy's eyes settled on him. "Your book got a page missing." The room went silent in that special way, when rich people realize the air isn't theirs. Klein's voice went tighter. "This is inappropriate." Bumpy nodded. So was the spit. Cal Mercer's face went pale. Klein turned sharply toward Dutch, a flash of anger. Dutch's eyes stayed calm, but his jaw tightened, because now Dutch wasn't muscle. He was a witness. Bumpy's gaze moved to Cal. "Cal," Bumpy said softly, "you still holding my napkin?" Cal's hand shook. He nodded. Bumpy smiled again, polite. "Keep it," Bumpy said. "You earned it." Cal's lips parted, confused. What does that mean?" Bumpy's voice went slower, meaner. "It means," Bumpy said, "everybody in this room knows who cleaned up, who tonight." Silence. Then whispers. Then the kind of social panic that spreads without sound. Because donors don't like being in the middle of a setup, and officials don't like being seen coordinating one. Har 5. The institution tried to resist immediately. Inspector Mott stepped forward, clipboard back in place, ruler retrieved like a comfort blanket. "This gathering is private," Mott said. "By the book. We can remove." Ruthie lifted her notepad. "By the book, you just coordinated an incident." Klein forced a laugh. "Let's be practical. This is a misunderstanding." Eddie spoke from the side, quiet. "Misunderstandings don't have timestamps." Dutch shifted, toothpick gone, and for the first time he looked unsure. Cal Mercer swallowed hard. "I didn't." Bumpy didn't raise his voice. He didn't accuse Cal like a prosecutor. He gave him a way to live. "Cal," Bumpy said, "calm, you wanted to be seen. Congratulations." Cal's eyes darted. "They told me." Miss Odessa finally spoke, voice soft and lethal from her chair. Baby, she said, don't say they like you weren't there. Cal's shoulders sagged, his confidence, his whole costume, started to peel. Because Bumpy's napkin did its job. It wiped away Cal's arrogance in public. And once a man's arrogance leaves him in public, he feels naked. Har 6. Consequences arrived like a chain reaction. First consequence, Klein lost the room. Donners started stepping away from him like he smelled like smoke. A council aide who'd been smiling earlier suddenly checked her watch and found a reason to leave. A landlord who'd promised cooperation suddenly remembered his wife needed him. Favor networks don't like witnesses. Second consequence, Inspector Mott's by the book became a problem, because now people could point to coordination, not coincidence. Complaints that had been ignored suddenly got returned calls. A review board meeting got scheduled, not justice, just pressure. But pressure changes behavior. Third consequence, Dutch's reputation cracked. Muscle is supposed to be invisible. Dutch had been seen, named, and timed. The next time he tried to help, a situation, people would remember the toothpick hitting the floor. That's how legends work. One visible mistake becomes a lifetime echo. And Cal didn't get punched. He got something worse. He got used up. Klein's people stopped answering him. Dutch stopped looking at him. Inspector Mott pretended he didn't exist. Cal realized he wasn't a partner. He was a disposable match, and now the match had burned his own fingers. The team paid a cost because the city always collects. 2 nights later, Savoy Deli got a surprise inspection. Health code, real petty, real loud. Miss Odessa received a tax letter stamped urgent, like fear in an envelope. Ruthie's apartment door had a fresh scratch near the lock. Nothing stolen, just a message. Eddie got tailed by a car that stayed 2 lengths back, steady as a metronome. That's what institutions do when they can't win clean. They make your life noisy. Day 2. Bumpy sat in the back booth of Savoy Deli, steam hissing from the coffee machine, fluorescent buzz overhead like a swarm. Leon stood nearby, calmer than before, but still learning. Ruthie slid in across from Bumpy, notepad tucked away. You humiliated them, Ruthie said. Bumpy shook his head. They humiliated themselves. I just held up the mirror. Eddie leaned on the counter, eyes tired. You know Klein won't forget this. Bumpy nodded. Men like Klein don't forget, they invoice. Miss Odessa sipped tea, eyes hard. So what you do when the bill come? Bumpy's voice stayed low. You pay it in paper, he said. Leon frowned. All that, from a spit. Bumpy looked at Leon like he was teaching him how the city breathes. It wasn't spit, Bumpy said. It was permission, Leon swallowed. Permission for what? Bumpy's eyes didn't blink. For them to call Harlem dangerous, Bumpy said, so they can call themselves necessary. Ruthie's voice softened. And Cal. Bumpy exhaled slow. Cal learned a proverb, Bumpy said. Miss Odessa raised an eyebrow. Which one? Bumpy's smile returned. Faint. If you borrow a bully's courage, you pay with your name. Bumpy said. Eddie nodded once. That's cold. Bumpy stirred his coffee. Slow. Cold keeps things honest, he replied. Ruthie leaned in, morally torn. Did he deserve it? Bumpy's eyes lifted to her. Deserve, he repeated softly. That word gets people killed. Silence stretched, Bumpy continued. Quiet. I gave him a way out, Bumpy said. He can take it, or he can keep being a tool. Miss Odessa's voice slid in like a blade wrapped in velvet. Baby, tools don't get respect, they get replaced. Bumpy nodded. And then he delivered the signature moral line, clean, quotable, and heavy. In this city, the man who stays calm isn't soft, he's dangerous, because he chooses the consequences. He looked at the napkin, now folded, and kept, a symbol turned into a lesson. Then, he added, even quieter, A public insult is just a private plan wearing perfume. So if that napkin moment froze your spine, if you felt the whole ballroom go silent when the stamp hit the like button like you're sealing the truth where it can't be buried. Subscribe for more street legend stories where power flips without a punch, and tell me in the comments, was Bumpy teaching restraint, or was he practicing a cleaner kind of revenge? Next time we're going even darker, because a church fundraiser gets accidentally audited, and the only thing saving the congregation is one signed affidavit with a fingerprint that shouldn't exist.